Welcome to the future. Welcome to Bitcoin Bit2Me's. It's a pleasure to be here with you for another month, and today is a very special occasion. As you all know, it's the anniversary, the 4th anniversary, as we were just discussing with Neil, of the launch of B2M, the platform's token, the utility token that you all know comes with a set of tools. But today, with great anticipation, we've been waiting for this for many months. That Neil would come back here again, and now we'll have him with us to go deeper and talk about everything that the development has meant over these months, the products, and also so you can ask him questions live. That's something I wanted to mention as well. If you have any questions about what Neil is discussing, just write them in the chat and we'll be paying attention. Giovanni, as you know, who always joins us, is on vacation, but he said, I don't want to miss this, I want to be here. So at any moment, we'll have him live with us. He told us he's going to try to join the call and say hi to everyone. Well, a shout out as well to those of you who are here live. Of course, Jordi, Roberto, Isi, Elvi, Luis. It's always a pleasure to see you, as always. And as I always do, this has become a tradition by now. I'm going to have to do a quick recap. As you know, we're in the month of November. We've just come out of October. And October wasn't one of the best months or one of the best performances for Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market in general, as you know. And we're in the middle of a strong correction. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, Bitcoin is around 102,000. We're seeing sharp drops across the entire ecosystem. And today I've chosen this chart for you to keep in mind. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, especially for the chart analysis, because now we also have Danielle, who is doing some very interesting analyses, not only of Bitcoin, but also of other cryptocurrencies and the overall market behavior or technical analysis, which is essential to understand beyond what I can tell you about what's happening on a macro level and the reasons that might make us think the market is correcting, is falling, or that we're entering a bear market. As you know, the fundamentals couldn't be better. We finally have a regulatory environment. We have a framework here in Europe, and in the United States, they're also legislating so that stable coins, Bitcoin, and the ecosystem in general can grow and move forward. Sooner or later, this attracts new investors, especially institutional ones, and the approval of ETFs, the Bitcoin treasuries we've talked about. Many times, those massive purchases being made by all these public companies using traditional financial instruments to accumulate still aren't enough to meet expectations, because we were all thinking, or at least I was, and I've said it publicly many times, that this last quarter of 2025 would take us to levels of 130, 150, or even higher. I've mentioned this before. What happens is that these developments or the steps that are taken by the institutional world are generally slower and more gradual in their progression. At certain moments, we also see sudden jumps. And in this chart that Jose is sharing with you, what you see on the screen are the peak points of each cycle. You can see some vertical green columns there, and then there's the white bar. The green represents the bull market, and the white represents the bear market. Then we have the dots, which mark the market top, the classic peak or all-time high. The pink line represents the price of Bitcoin over time in the spot market. So then we also have the dash 200 session line, which means that when the pink line is above it, we are in an uptrend. When the pink line is below, we're in a downtrend. Therefore, as you can see up in the top right, we could be entering a corrective phase just like in other cycles and move into an accumulation phase. That's where positions are built to then take off and go higher. How much are we going to correct? Well, right now there are several factors making this correction particularly strong overall, such as the geopolitical environment. As you know, the United States is sending ships, it's sending soldiers to the Caribbean region, partly because of the situation in Venezuela, and I think there's an expectation or a lot of attention focused there. And the disruption that this could cause, an attack by the United States on Venezuela, could lead investors who hold positions in risk assets such as Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies to move out, even though many of us believe that Bitcoin has characteristics that protect us in difficult times, and I do think that will continue to be the case. Obviously, in the short term, people feel safer holding dollars, so they unwind their positions and move to the dollar. Could we be entering a bear market? And could the top have already happened on October 6th or 7th when we saw $125,000? Well, I don't know. Let's hope not. In Daniel's videos, which I watch, he says that we're going to see a rebound and that we'll go for new highs at $130,000 or $135,000, and that the altcoins also still have one final push to make. On the other hand, aside from the geopolitical issue, we have a very interesting topic. We've talked before about global liquidity, about M2, which is a measure of the money supply issued by different players, central banks, commercial banks, and so on. And when there's a lot of liquidity, that's good for risk assets. Well, right now, it's not that there's a specific liquidity problem, but rather that the interbank market, known as the repo market, apparently is a bit stuck. Stuck because money isn't being lent in a smooth, efficient way. And that's also affecting assets like Bitcoin. So in that context, well, we'll see what happens. We're all waiting to see what happens at the end of the year. I think that's going to be a very interesting time frame to watch how the price evolves. In the short term, I still remain bullish. I think we still have another push left. But well, I was wrong about October. November has started. As you can see, with drops, with corrections, and we have to see how this year ends. And why do I think that despite everything, we need to zoom out, we need to step back from the chart and think of Bitcoin as a strategic asset, as an asset that's here to change finance and the traditional monetary system? Well, Jose, I've also left you the other one. In this case, I'm talking about holiday inflation and about the increase we're seeing in the prices of all products. Whether it's the everyday shopping basket, the energy that we use, buying an automobile, or going on vacation, we see that the money we use keeps on losing its value. Not only that, but we also see that the products we buy are either of lower quality or come in smaller quantities compared to the product they sold us 2, 3, or 5 years ago. And that's the underlying reason, what we need to truly internalize and carefully understand, that the position we're building in Bitcoin is for the medium and long term. It's an asset that, if you look at the previous chart, keeps going up over long periods of time, but it's also true that when there's a complicated global context, it does take a hit. It's also true that we're above 100,000, right? Who would have wanted that 2 or 3 years ago when we were talking and it was at 20 or 25? So with this bar of nougat, what you see is that every year they take away a little more quantity and raise the price. In this specific case, with this brand of chocolate, well, over the last 2 years, they've reduced the number of grams they give us and increased the price, just as you can see on the screen, right? It's outrageous. So this is actually part of the reason why Bitcoin truly needs to exist. We need to fully understand this. We have to exchange those euros, which are steadily losing value, for a hard asset, a real digital asset, which is Bitcoin. And over time, the performance of this digital asset will prove us right. And when we see these geopolitical events or a lack of liquidity or problems in the banking, financial, or monetary system, in the end, what governments and central banks do is solve it by printing more money. Because they have no other choice, because that's the way they have to do it. And more money in the system will eventually trickle into different assets: gold, real estate, Bitcoin. And with all those doors that have been opened, it will come. What about altcoins? Some people might say, well, why don't you talk about altcoins? Altcoins are technological proposals launched by companies or foundations that may have very interesting, disruptive, and powerful applications. But the problem with altcoins is that in the end, keep in mind, there are more than 40,000 of them. And while Bitcoin's proposition is very specific for the rest of the cryptocurrencies, if that project, foundation, or company succeeds, we will probably a very interesting investment. But if that company doesn't do well, we're also going to face a high risk. So that's why I always leave you with this message and make a distinction between Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrencies. So, well, that being said, I don't know if Giovanni has joined yet. I know we have Neil with us, who is today's main guest, but I wanted to give you this introduction on an important day, the 4th of November. We're in that last quarter, which has traditionally been good, but this year it seems that's not the case. So without further ado, let's welcome Neil, if that's all right with you, since everyone is eager to hear from him and to learn about all the latest updates. How are you, Neil? How are you doing?
Hello, Javier. Thank you very much. As you know, it's always a pleasure for me to come here and join you once again. Giovanni will also come by for a moment to say hello. I feel really bad about it, that he couldn't be here for the whole hour. But anyway, I'm really excited to be here, happy to hear you again, and to once again be convinced to buy Bitcoin. It's always the same. I can't talk to you without that happening. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking a bit about how this past year has gone, because in the end, the current situation of the whole market is still pretty strange, I'd say, since there are a lot of macro indicators pointing in opposite directions. And depending on who you ask, or even what day of the week you ask, you'll get a different opinion. But what does remain very solid is what we're going to talk about today. in terms of utilities, in terms of the value of B2M within B2Me, we'll see how the impact has more than doubled over the past year compared to what we talked about a year ago in a similar live stream where we reviewed the utilities and all the impact it had during 2024. In 2025, as I said, it has doubled or even more. So that's a fact. And that's something that, as the Bit2Me and B2M team, makes us very happy that we've been able to make such great use of B2M's utility over this past year.
Well, as I said, I think we're all eager to hear from you. I think the work being done is outstanding, and the utility that's been built over these 4 years is remarkable. Interaction with all the products, benefits, the gamification of the platform with the Space Center, the latest tools you told us about. But in any case, every update is good too, Neil, because new Bit2Meros are joining, getting to know the company, the platform, getting to know the token. And well, I think today, with you, we can take the opportunity to answer questions while also providing training to all those who are joining and to those who are already here, and it will surely help them refresh some ideas, so it's fantastic.
100%. All right, so if you want, I can go ahead and start sharing my screen now, and then we can take some time to discuss everything together.
Great, let's do it.
All right, so as I was saying, I don't just want this live to be about updates, but I'd also like to go over some things that maybe the veterans and people who have been with us for a while might see and think, you've already explained this to me, I already know how this works. But you know that one of my biggest hobbies in life is being on the Bit2Me and B2M Telegram channels. So I read everything. And for the past few months, I've been seeing a lot of questions that if we had asked the token holders a year ago, would have already been answered because we've been resolving them over time. But now I see users who are having those same questions again, which is actually a very good sign. That means there are a lot of new token holders coming in who want to know a bit about where B2M comes from, what the advantages are, and so on. So what we're going to do today is not only review the numbers and the latest updates for the future, but we'll also talk a bit about the impact and how that impact works within Bit2Me. I'll try to make it as agile as possible so that those B2M holders who have been with us for a while don't feel like we're just repeating the same things. But it's also true that I'd like us to read the YouTube comments and so on. And if we need to go deeper into any particular utility or explanation, we can go back and cover it again so it's better understood in that sense, okay? So having said that, as we know, we're celebrating our 4-year anniversary. Let's start by talking about the anniversary campaign. Since we launched it last Thursday, October 30th, maybe some people haven't seen it yet. Just so you know, we currently have an active B2M anniversary campaign in which we're giving away 2 million B2M to 20 winners. And what we've done is divided into 4 packages to celebrate in a way. The 4, let's say, things in quotes that you can do with B2M. In this case, one example would be holding for a long time. For instance, that's why we say that if you have more than 10,000 B2M and you've held them for more than 6 months, you can participate automatically because a quarter of these 2 million is distributed among those people. Well, among 5 winners who have held more than 10,000 B2M over the last 6 months. This way, we reward the oldest token holders without them having to do anything. They just need to sign up for the promo, and that's it. But then these same people can also participate in the other 3 price segments. In case it's not clear, I've seen some of you have doubts. You can participate in all of them. You can win all 4 prizes. Let's say you could win up to 400,000 B2M, which would obviously be great. The last segments are also meant to promote those actions you can take with B2M, such as buying and holding, in case you want to increase your exposure to B2M to level up, improve your benefits, and so on. Then we have another segment that's for B2M locking. If you lock new B2M for 12 months, this gives you points. And finally, redemption, which is the redemption of B2M that also gives you points. All these things I've mentioned are with packages of 1,000 B2M. Each package of 1,000 B2M counts as 1 entry. At the end of these 2 months, you should also know that this is a very long campaign. So first, there's no rush. And second, I have people close to me who are taking it little by little, but consistently trying to redeem a little each day or lock a bit more or just doing whatever they want. But that's basically how the campaign works as of today. And every 1,000 B2M is 1 more entry so that later we can select the 5 winners from each of the segments If you have any questions about the campaign or anything else, we can also clarify it again on Telegram. But just so you know, we will be sending out communications to make sure everyone understands exactly how the campaign works. So if we continue, let's start with this review of the past year. It will begin with a very important number, which is actually the one we like the most or value the most, and that's the increase in token holders. It's about how many people have joined B2Me and said, wow, I see utility in this token. It makes sense to me. I'm going to acquire it. In this case, we have 27% more token holders compared to our last anniversary, which is a very good increase. That's almost 20,000 new token holders. And honestly, there are many tokens out there that don't even have 20,000 users, while in our case, we've gained 20,000 new ones just in the past year. So this is something very favorable, very positive. Let's remember that this figure is only from the B2Me platform. If we also consider those outside the B2Me platform, as you know, a few months ago, we reached 100,000 token holders, and we really want to highlight and express our gratitude to all the token holders who trust in us and who trust in B2M and its utility. That's why we haven't included those 100,000 here, because in this case, we're only counting those who are on the Bit2Me platform. We can see that there has been continuous growth. From here, I can assure you, on behalf of the B2M team, that there hasn't been a single week this year with a negative conversion of B2M holders. That is, we've never lost more B2M holders than we've gained. This hasn't happened in any week, so there are always new users coming in, always new ones. And last year, I remember explaining a bit about how many of those new users became B2M holders. This year, I thought it appropriate to mention that we're not talking about all B2Me users, but rather about the more active users on the platform, meaning those who are actually trading using products and everything else that comes with being active on the platform. I can tell you that more than 65% of those active users are B2M holders. This also gives a lot of power and significance to the importance of being a B2M holder within the platform, which we demonstrate throughout the platform with the utilities and benefits that we'll see later on, all the advantages and promotions that have been distributed. If we continue, we can see a breakdown of the current location and how the B2M supply is distributed in the market today. We see three main groups: what's locked, which has reached more than 25% of the total supply out of the 5 billion with which we launched B2M. Then we see the small percentage that has been burned, which keeps increasing every day. We'll talk about it later, but the burn feature has been a resounding success, with more and more people burning and more B2M being burned each time.
You're going to explain what the burn is, right?
Exactly. We'll go over again what the concept of this redemption is, which ends up becoming a burn, how it's more commonly known in the industry, but we call it redemption. Not only because we believe it's something special on our platform, but also because it helps those who are unfamiliar with the concept of burning in the industry. We believe that the concept of redemption is much more approachable and much easier to understand for that type of user, since, as you already know, we always want to welcome all kinds of users to the platform and to B2M. So what we have left are the last 2 points, which are the B2M on the market, basically everything else that is in circulation, and finally, what is held by the company. Remember, this is not just the reserve, but also other types of allocations that are distributed as time goes by. These are the main differences we have, or rather the main breakdown within the B2M supply. Here, just as Javier was saying, let's quickly go over what the exchange of B2M is. The exchange of B2M, let's remember, was created as a new mission of Space Center, a mission that was or is the third one involving B2M. As you already know, Space Center was launched to boost B2M, not to take away from it, but to give it much more value. Because when we launched Space Center, we became much more capable of developing exclusive advantages and benefits that we couldn't offer before. The oldest and most old school ones. Of B2M holders will remember the tier system we used to have. That tier system had two uses: commission discounts and higher APY. And on top of that, it had 5 tiers, which had very few users, both proportionally and in absolute terms compared to what we have now in Space Center, with people benefiting from those advantages. So what Space Center has done is not only provide more room and offer more advantages, but also open itself up to all that great potential and all those people who didn't want to participate or didn't see it as possible to participate in the antibody system. And now they do see it as feasible and become token holders because of it. Thus, this third new type of B2M issuance was born, the B2M redemption issuance. Let's remember that its greatest strength is that the points never expire. You never have to worry about your points expiring at any time. There is absolutely no expiration. And let's also remember that it does not detract from the buy and hold B2M mission. Therefore, if you buy B2M and later burn it through redemption, you don't lose points from either of the two missions. So you keep accumulating points to level up and thus gain more advantages. How does the redemption system work? Well, let's remember how it works. We start with the user deciding to redeem in exchange for points or benefits. Because as we'll discuss later, the redemption that this type of issuance redemption is something we wanted to be the first feature so we can launch other functionalities related to redemption in the future, giving users much more flexibility and many more opportunities to make those redemptions. Then in step 2, B2M accumulates all these redeemed B2M. Let's remember that there is no direct burn, and that burning means sending B2M to a blockchain address, which is dead, so no one can access those B2EM. And that's why it's called burning, because it's like taking a bill and burning it, since you're completely reducing the market supply. This is exactly the opposite of what Javier is always preaching about fiat money, where we keep printing and injecting more money. In this case, it's about removing money from circulation.
Right, exactly. That's it. Just so people understand, I mean, you've explained it very well, but basically it's an address we use, but no one has any way to move funds from that address to another. And what does that mean? That you can't sell those B2M and they're always going to stay there. They'll never move. So with fewer B2M in circulation, well, there's a squeeze, right? Like Neil was saying, there's an adjustment. Just like with Bitcoin, when addresses are lost, there's no way to access them. You can't recover those Bitcoins and the remaining Bitcoins become more valuable. Well, the same thing happens here, and that's not the case with euros, dollars, or any of those currencies.
So that's exactly it. What we're doing is reducing the supply a little bit, little by little, every month. Because what we do in step 3 is once we've collected all the B2M tokens exchanged during the last month, we burn them. We actually make the transfer. And as many of you know, if today you go to the B2M landing page, the B2M website within B2ME, either the public landing or inside your app. If you go to the B2M section in the part about redeemed B2M, you can access the burn calendar that we've been carrying out over the last 6 months. And there you can see what's known as the transaction hash. I don't want to go into much more detail there, but for those who might not believe us, for example, that we've made this transfer, you can check that hash through SurScan, or well, you can access the transaction and see the amount when the transfer was made and to which address. And you can confirm that this address is dead, meaning that no one has access to it. That said, let's move on. If there are more questions about what burning is or about redemption, we'll talk about it later. This is exactly what I was mentioning before, that you can access it from your app and from the B2M landing page, the B2M page within B2Me. Sorry, the connection just dropped while I was giving my wallet address, and whoever had it would get an airdrop of B2M. But since the connection was cut, I can't share it. Anyway, sorry about that. I'm going to go over the B2M holder week topic a bit. Just quickly, let's remember that this is where we can see all the information about B2M. I don't know exactly when the connection dropped, so I'm not sure if we were able to go into detail here or not, but you have the information about B2M and how the supply fluctuates, whether it's locked, redeemed, or in circulation. On the public B2Me website, on the B2M landing page, in the B2M section, and within the app in the B2M token section. I'm not going to go into more detail here. Regarding the B2M holder week, what I was saying is that we've run many holder week campaigns this past year, one each month, or at least one every 2 months, because sometimes the price is big enough to combine several months into one. What I was mentioning here is that I'm not going to go over all the prices we've given out, but I do want to remind you that the B2M holder weeks are monthly campaigns that only benefit and reward B2M holders. And this is very important because it means that every month, without having to do anything special, we have a prize and a reward, which in this case are usually divided into 2 segments. One is B2M locked for 6 months, about 10,000. a minimum of B2M. And if not, there's also the segment for having 50,000 B2M or more locked for the next 12 months or in a 12-month pool. It doesn't matter how much time is left in the pool, as long as it's the 12-month pool. That means those of you who already have this set up don't have to do absolutely anything to participate in these B2M hot desk weeks, which is a huge advantage for you. And you don't have to do anything else here, as I was saying. Thank you. I don't want to mention all the prizes we've given out, but I do want to highlight the more than 10,000 B2M holders that we've managed to level up during the different campaigns we've run. The data shows me that this feature is being used, and every time we level up these people, they take advantage of it to make the most of their benefits, which, as you know, I absolutely love. So I'm sure we'll keep doing these level ups in the future. And on the other hand, I also want to highlight the more than 100,000 euros we've distributed through token airdrops, which have come our way, and we've been able to secure some partnerships to carry out these types of airdrops. So these two are the most important, but we have other campaigns that, as you know, we've been running, and you can find them on the Bit2Me blog. Now, highlighting some numbers from the Space Center, you already know that these are some of my favorites and the ones I'm most excited about, because in the end, we showcase all the benefits we've managed to distribute just for being a B2M holder. Because as I mentioned before, B2M is the main driving force and engine behind Space Center, which means that of the rewards we're seeing here, 95% or more have been distributed to B2M holders. So for me, a Space Center user is still a B2M holder, because that's what the data shows. Here, I want to highlight the more than 1 million euros distributed in commission discounts on transactions, both in wallet and in Pro. You will see this later on as one of the improvements we're currently developing. The goal is to show this and make it clear, and to really be able to fully appreciate absolutely everything that has been given in terms of discounts and improvements regarding commission discounts in PRO and brokerage, since as of today, you currently can't see it. Right now, you can't see how much you've actually saved on commissions for being level X in SpaceM. You'll be able to see it soon, but as we've already mentioned, the total amount exceeds 1 million euros distributed through this commission discount. Then another major feature of Space Center, which I keep seeing everyone talking about nonstop on Telegram, and it's no wonder, I use it myself and it's fantastic, is the B2M cashback. We have distributed more than 500,000 euros in B2M as cashback. So that's also very powerful and shows the great utility of this card, which we've had for a couple of years now and is quite useful and widely used by our B2M holders. Let's remember, and we'll emphasize this again later, but let's remember that this 500,000 euros in B2M is purchased on the open market. That is, every time a card cashback is given, that card cashback is used to buy B2M on the open market, and then it is granted. I've seen that there are some doubts about where it comes from, whether it comes from the company's reserves, or if there's some liquidity injection. No, it is bought on the market at the exact moment the purchase is made. So this is also important to highlight. And then regarding earn, we have distributed up to 200 million B2M through the B2M farming pools. As you know, we have a portion of the reserve allocated for this, for those people who hold B2M. So they are rewarded with these 200 million, and we have distributed more than 80 million in rewards for other coins. Those of you who already use earn know that if you receive your rewards and interest in B2M, for many coins you get a bonus, which ranges from an extra 1% up to an extra 4% that you can receive in rewards if you choose to get them in B2M. And something else that's interesting and that some people still don't know is that if you don't receive your reward in B2M, your reward is distributed weekly. But when you receive your reward in B2EM, your reward is distributed daily. Therefore, based on basic principles of compound interest, it's much more beneficial for you to have your reward distributed daily, because that generates new capital to calculate the new APY. So you're always increasing a little bit, and that's why it's often said that compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world, because it's so important. In fact, Neil, if you choose the daily option, you just have to activate it with a toggle that lets you say, hey, I don't want to receive it in B2M, and then it automatically gets deposited into earn. You don't have to do anything. In other words, it goes directly into the flexible pool, specifically the flexible B2M earn pool. That's right. What I personally do, and I know some people, colleagues and friends also do is that they have all the coins set to B2M so that they generate more APY daily, and we have this auto compounding feature. What they do is once a week or once a month, they gather all the B2M that's in the flexible pool and deposit it into locked pools to get an even higher APY and better returns on those B2M. So it's an action that is actually done regularly in that sense. Also, from a depreciation standpoint, this is very important. Thank you. And the need or importance that B2M has, as we said, goes beyond just buying it. Right now, we already have two new types of missions, which are the B2M lock and the B2M redemption, and both allow you to level up much faster than with any of the other missions. Here you can quickly calculate with the missions that come up for you. None of them give you more points than the B2M ones for a lower cost. That is, in terms of cost-benefit ratio, there is no mission more profitable than the B2M ones. And here we see some approximate values, because remember that this doesn't depend on amount level, but rather on the number of points that grant you a level. So the amounts for each person will vary, because each person uses the card more or less, uses it more or less, uses other products, uses Pro, uses brokerage. So everything is going to change, and it depends on the user. But here I've made some average calculations of the amounts in euros in B2M that are required to move up to each level depending on which path you choose, knowing that they can also be perfectly combined. I know a lot of people who have their B2M locked, which already gives them a lot of points. And on top of that, they also exchange part of what they receive in cashback, for example, or what they get in ERN, and they keep exchanging it to increase their position. In terms of points, in an unlimited way, because in the end, those points don't expire, which gives them more security by not having to constantly perform actions. So these are significant amounts. I think they're very interesting, especially coming from the previous system where even with a huge amount of capital contribution, it was impossible to reach a good tier. In this case, with a capital contribution that I believe is quite competitive compared to other companies, you can achieve very interesting benefits within the platform. That's why we're very happy to be able to offer this to our users, and that many are already taking advantage of it. So going back a bit to what we were saying earlier with Javier about there being a lot of new people, let's do a quick review of just 3 slides on how B2M impacts different products, so it's a bit clearer what that impact is. Let's start with ER, which is exactly what we were discussing earlier with Javier, that you can choose to receive the rewards in B2M or in the currency. In this case, let's use an example where I'm holding GRT. I have 500 euros in GRT, and I'm in error. And I decide to activate what Javier mentioned earlier, that you can activate manually super easily with a small button to receive the rewards in B2M. What that does is give you an extra 4% API, okay? In this case, we see the Space Center level, which gave you 13. So to that 13, we add the additional 4% on top, which is actually a very good relative percentage, honestly, for receiving it in B2M. And when the time comes for distribution, which remember is a daily distribution, what we'll do is take the 13% you should receive in GRT, go to the market, sell it, buy B2M, and give you B2M bought from the market, not a capital injection. So that 13% comes directly from the market. It's buying pressure. The more people choose to receive payment in B2M, the more buying pressure there is on B2M. And finally, this extra incentive, which leads many people to go all the way and activate this bonus and this additional incentive for getting paid in B2M. Yes, it is injected from the reserve, but it's done in a way that's clearly shown here visually, where the injection from the B2M reserve is never equal to or greater than what is actually bought from the market. So it's a fairly balanced pressure in terms of market impact. And finally, you would end up receiving your B2M interest, obviously. Then regarding the card, it's very simple. In this case, you have EURC because, for example, I always like to use stable coins, but everyone can use whatever they prefer. In this case, we have a level 6, which gives us 5% cash back. If I go over that, I head to the B2Me Live section, where, as you already know, we have many deals and businesses with which we have partnerships and collaborations, which gives us extra cash back. So imagine that I managed to get extra cash back, in this case in DOT, which gives me 24% cash back on top of the 5% I already get just for being level 6 in Space Enter. In this case, I would have a total of 29% cash back, all of which comes from the market. As I mentioned before, it is all purchased from the market. In this case, there is no percentage, no portion that is injected into circulation through the company's reserve. Everything comes from the market. And well, on Telegram, there are many cases of people who keep using the card, who take that B2M, lock it up for 12 months in ERM to get a lot of profitability and high returns. So there are a lot of people here. If you join the Telegram group, which I highly recommend if you're new, B2M holders, because honestly, there's not only a lot of knowledge there, but also on a personal level, it's the closeness and the ability in that group is amazing, especially from the passengers and other very active users to help answer questions. I mean, sometimes I read messages and I've never seen a question where in the time between when the message was sent and when I read it, there haven't already been 3 people who replied like, look, it's like this, this, and this works like this, and this, I can help you this way. Or this is done because that's the level of activity and the amount of help there is in that group. I haven't seen that in any other community. So if you're new holders, I really encourage you to join the Telegram group, because on top of that, we have Giovanni, who, as I said, if you're new, you'll see him every month. Since every month he's there with Javier sharing the latest updates, but he's also very active in the group, always helping however he can, providing all the documents he can. So that's it.
He's already here with us, and later Giovanni will say hello to us, and Elvi, who sends you a smiley face with hearts, which is definitely something to be grateful for. And to the passengers, as Neil says, our infinite gratitude for your patience, your work, the knowledge that you have so often. The things from you that the whole team learns from directly are truly valuable. So thank you for being there as well.
100%. You give us very important visibility because you know that we have a very strong concept of active listening, and we'll see that later on when we talk about new features, since many of them come from or are inspired by ideas from the feedback channel, which shows just how important that is. And we truly appreciate it a lot. But also the passengers and those more active users give us a lot of visibility into what the community wants, what the unit is doing, or the problems it has. Because since they're there and are just like any other member, they provide us with a lot of information. And I can absolutely assure you that those users know much more about B2Me than some of the employees at B2Me. If I ask some employees certain things, they would give me different answers than what the passengers would tell me in terms of how a product works, how the system operates, and so on. So I have absolutely no doubt about that. So we've now finished with the utilities, in this case, the impact of B2M within certain things, some features that are mentioned about B2Me, and let's also remember the impact on referrals. When you refer a user and they receive rewards in B2M, what you're actually doing is receiving the rewards in euros, but once you cash them out or withdraw them, they are converted to B2M. I also want to reemphasize that this B2M comes from the market. At that moment, when you make that withdrawal, the B2M is bought on the market and granted from the market. All right? It doesn't come from the reserve either. So then, one very important comment I'd like to make here is to reflect on the topic of the 2 main B2M flows that I've been discussing over the last few slides. What comes from the market and what comes from the company's reserve. All right? On the left side, we can see everything that has come from the market over the past year, which are, as we've already mentioned, the referral part, the portion of those coins we've decided to collect in B2M, the API, and the cashback from generated cash. And on the right side, we see those items that come out of the company's reserve, which are mainly the farming pools, the B2M farming pools, well, farming, I'm not sure how to call it, and that extra APY we mentioned, which serves as a bit of an incentive for users to choose to receive their APYs in B2M. As we can see, there is currently a disparity due to the large amount of B2M we are distributing through the farming pools. Soon, we will have to renew the farming pools for the next year, and in the following slides, we'll see which ones. We haven't decided on the renewal numbers yet, but we do have an idea of the direction and strategic lines we want to follow for these renewals, both for this year and the coming years. This is also to get your feedback and hear your thoughts. Regarding the current status of B2M lockups, as of today, there are more than 1.35 billion B2M locked right now, which, as we've already seen, is more than a quarter of the total B2M out of the 5 billion, which is really impressive. Not only that, but a fact that I find fantastic and that people don't know about today, but I think is quite striking, is that of those semi-locked B2M, 75% are in 12-month pools. In other words, that's a clear demonstration of the interest, value, and trust that B2M holders have in B2M and B2Me, because 75% of the B2M have been locked for 12 months. That's something that, as part of B2M and B2Me, I really like to see, because not only are people receiving higher APYs, since there are people here who lock for 6 or 3 months or leave it flexible, but it also shows that long-term confidence in the project. So that's very powerful and super interesting. Another point that I know people want to know about, and that right now we're announcing publicly, but soon we'll be able to announce and start sharing publicly, is the amount of B2M that we're currently deducting from funds that are withdrawn early from the locked pools. As you already know, this is going to end up being B2M that gets burned, which as of today, it hasn't been burned yet, but the medium to long-term goal is for all of this to be burned. In this case, we have accumulated more than 9 million B2M because for those users who are new, when you lock B2M, we allow what we call early unlocking. That is, you can decide that you no longer want those B2M to be locked and you withdraw them. But that comes with specific conditions. In other words, if you have locked your tokens, you are receiving a higher APY for that locking action. If you unlock them, not only do you lose those rewards and the APY generated during that time, but also one of the conditions is that 10% of the funds you initially deposited are deducted from your account. And these are the ones accumulating in those 9 million that will eventually be burned. Because as you know, at Bit2Me, we don't want to profit from that, nor do we want that to be a business model where the deductions become income for the company. We didn't want to do that. When we launched, it was the last thing we wanted, which is why what we're doing is accumulating it. We conducted a survey among B2M holders, and you decided that instead of distributing them among all B2M holders, you wanted to burn them. So that's what we're going to do, because even if you don't see them burned yet, you should know that this is the goal. Therefore, we also consider them as out of circulation. And finally, we are also not accumulating, far from it. Instead, we are reintroducing into the farming pools that distribute the APY, 2.5 million B2M that we deducted due to the early unlock. As we mentioned, one of the conditions for the early unlock is that all the rewards you generated, we take them back. We remove them, we recover them ourselves. And why is that? Because we are going to distribute them among those users and those B2M holders who are indeed keeping their funds locked in order to reward those holders. So those 2.5 million are put back into the pool from which they came, this farming pool, to be distributed. And in this live session, we are doing for the first time, because it didn't exist in the last update live, the same thing, but with the redemption part. How many B2N have been redeemed by users, and what has that amounted to? As of today, roughly 4.5 million B2M have been redeemed. At the time of the action, more than 50,000 euros were redeemed, and with that, we distributed over 150,000 points to B2M holders, which is really powerful. You already know that we had a lot of faith for those B2M holders who wanted to earn a lot of points with the lowest possible cost, because remember that redeeming B2M is the type of issuance that gives you the most points for the least effort. In terms of economic cost, and here we see a lot of potential, and we see how more and more users are redeeming. Not only that, but I'm also really glad to know that as of today, there aren't many, but there are some completely new users to the platform who have just arrived at Bit2Me and in less than a week on the platform are already making a redemption because they see its usefulness and say, wow, I want these points because I want to reach these levels. And that, well, in the end, as I always say, I love that because we see and we can experience that utility of B2M through the benefits. Now, to wrap up the presentation and then move on to any questions, doubts, or anything else you need, let's finish with the new features we're going to launch with B2M. It's true that these aren't major new features, but I want to convey the mindset we have right now, not just at Bit2Me in general, but especially for B2M, which is something very important, which is preparing ourselves for the expansion we're undertaking with Bit2Me now that we've had the MyHere license approved. Many of you know that when the MyK license is approved, we're allowed to advertise and promote ourselves in other countries, something we couldn't do until now. We've been quite limited in terms of growth and expansion, and ultimately what we want to do with Space Center B2M, our top priority, and as I said, I believe it's also B2Me's, is to be ready both technically and in terms of product for that expansion and the influx of new users, so we can offer them the best services with the highest quality. So at B2M Space Center, we have the same objectives. Being able to offer these great advantages to as many users as possible and making sure it's very clear how what already exists today actually works. This is an area where we have room for improvement, which we're aware of. And with all the knowledge we've gained over the past 2 years, we're going to implement changes. And in fact, we're already implementing them right now. One example is the case of accumulated benefits. As I mentioned earlier, right now you can't really see the total amount of discounts that have been received, both in PRO and in brokerage operations at the Space Center level. In this case, you will be able to see it. You'll be able to view this total of accumulated discounts, and we'll also introduce a powerful new feature, an estimate of what you could have received or would have received if you had been at a higher level than Space Center. This is really useful for those users who, as I've noticed, try to calculate whether it's worth it for them to upgrade their level, or how many months would it take me with my usual activity or by increasing my activity to recover or make these actions profitable. Well, with this, we'll be able to see it. Obviously, it's an approximation because we're assuming that all the behavior you've had would have occurred at that next level, but it's still very powerful and interesting information in terms of asking, okay, how much would I have earned? If instead of being at level 4, you could move up to level 5. This really is quite interesting. Another new point, which aims to meet the needs and demands expressed by many users who felt they didn't want to participate in the gamification aspect of Space Center, which, as you already know, just like I mentioned earlier, that the redemption feature was designed to reach people who weren't familiar with the concept of burning but still wanted to participate. Our goal is always to reach all users and make it as easy as possible for everyone. To users who have told us they don't want to take part in the gamification of Space Center but do want the benefits of Space Center, many of you already know about the fast track concept, which is the direct purchase of B2M, the exact amount you need to reach the level you're aiming for. In this case, what we're doing is going beyond that. And what we do, as you can see here, is show you the points you currently have, the additional points you need to reach your desired level, and we give you 3 options to get to that level. We give you the option to buy B2M directly, hold on to it, and earn the points you need. We also give you the option to, instead of buying, lock up your B2M to reach this level. And finally, the last option is to redeem your B2M to reach this level. Please, since we all know each other here, don't pay attention to these values. These values are just examples, so you can easily see how the difficulty scales. Depending on the user's action, if you buy and burn, it's less effort than having to lock up, and it's less financial effort than just buying. Basically, as you already know, it depends on the situation of B2M in each case. When you buy, you have it there in flexible. When you lock it, it's locked but still in your position. And when you redeem, the B2M is being burned, so the economic effort is lower. That said, not only we want this to be used by users who aren't interested in gamification, but also by those who want a boost. I know that many of you are just 100 or 200 points away from reaching the next level, and you want to get there now, you want to get there right away. By clicking this shortcut, you'll be able to see how much you have left to reach that level. So don't think of this system as either you use Space Center or you use the shortcut, because that's not true. You can use it whenever you want. Every time you press it, the system will automatically calculate how many points you have left and, therefore, how much you need to buy and lock, buy and redeem. So this also meets that need. Redesign of Space Center. Some of you have already seen this because we've shared some of the initial designs with you. We've asked for your input, and we conducted a survey where we received a lot of feedback that we've implemented to tweak things, and we've made 2 major changes. One is for users who are already in Space Center, who are already level 1 or higher and already know how the system works, but feel they could get more out of it. In this case, the main difference is that we now allow a recommended mission system, which suggests missions that, based on your behavior, are likely to suit you best. We know there are a lot of missions available nowadays, and you'll also see how we enable mission filtering and organization, so that everyone can adapt the Space Center a bit to their own style, their behavior, and so on. Since with so many new missions, the mission list has honestly become a bit overwhelming. And for new users, we focused on simplicity because we found that many people who were new to Space Center felt a bit overwhelmed by all the new features they encountered. So what we're aiming for here is simplicity. We've enabled a model in which we allow you to unlock your benefits because that's what you get when you reach level 1, with 4 extremely simple tasks that get you to level 1. We don't show them all the missions we have in Space Center because we believe these users don't need to know about them yet, since they're not even at level 1. First, you reach level 1, and then we unlock everything else for you. These 4 missions, just so you know, are adding funds to the platform, verifying your profile, and making a purchase of 20 euros worth of B2M. So even in these initial missions that we're promoting to those level 0 users, in other words, new users, we're already involving B2M from the start, which is very powerful. New B2M redemption mechanisms. This is one of the new redemption mechanisms, and as we said, the B2M mission part is just the beginning. We want to launch several B2M redemption systems to allow each user to get the most out of this new feature. In this case, what we're proposing is that in the daily access missions of 7, 15, and 30 days in Space Center, for those of you who already know Space Center, you know what it is. And for those who don't, let me remind you that there are missions where you can earn up to 500 points, if I'm not mistaken, without any kind of monetary transaction or anything, just by entering Space Center, which I still come across people who, after finishing the 30 days, complain that they have to keep logging in. I'm really sorry, but you just got 500 points for free, which in many cases is half a level in Space Center. All you have to do is log in daily. That's it. Even so, since we know there are people who either don't want to do it, or what really gets to me the most is seeing people who forget one day and that breaks their streak, what we want to launch is a kind of protection system. For that streak, what we do is allow you to directly complete the missions by redeeming B2M. In other words, you redeem an amount of B2M, which hasn't been defined yet, and that automatically completes the 7-day mission for you. If you redeem another amount of B2M, the 15-day mission is completed. And if you redeem a different amount, the 30-day mission is completed. When we launch this, we'll do another live stream to explain it, but basically, it means the missions will be completed. I don't want it to seem like you'll never have to do them again. They are completed, and the 30-day expiration period is activated. So when you complete the 7-day, 15-day, or 30-day mission, automatically, what you're really gaining is time to come back and participate actively and organically so that it doesn't expire on you. Or if it does expire, you can redeem B2M again. We believe this is a feature that could be very powerful for users who don't want to log in or who forget to log in, making redeeming B2M more useful beyond just earning points. And finally, if I'm not mistaken, well, almost finally, we have the renewal of the B2M farming pools. As I said, we haven't defined the numbers yet, okay? But I want to share with you all the thought process we're going through at B2M regarding this update to the pools, all right? Because as you know, I personally really like to involve everyone. And before we decide anything, I also want to share a bit of our reasoning and mindset so that we're all on the same page. In this case, to quickly summarize, the 2025 farming pools, as you already know, were distributed as follows. 50 million in the base pool, meaning everyone received those 50 million. 100 million for what we call the level pool, meaning those 100 million B2M were distributed across different levels from 1 to 7. And 100 million for what we call the lock pool, which is the B2M lock pool, and is only distributed among funds that are locked for 3, 6, or 12 months. With this logic, what we do is that the user, or the B2M, is the one who is at level 0 in the flexible pool. And the B2M that receives the highest APY is the one in the 12-month lock pool and at level 7 in Space Center, right? This way, it's much fairer. Those 250 million ended up representing, or are ending up representing, more than 5% of the total annual B2M issuance, okay? And if we only consider the circulating supply, it has represented or is representing more than 10%, all right? That's good because in the end, the goal of B2M is for everything to be distributed and injected. But it's also true that when we look at the third point, we see that in comparison to what has been bought on the market and what has been distributed, it's 50% more, all right, what has been injected. And that's something that some of us users like in terms of the token's health. And finally, if we continue at this pace, we won't be able to provide that APY for more than 2 years. This is going to last less than 3 years with this level of APY distribution. The reflections we're making right now with these figures are basically going a bit from the bottom up instead of top down. First, we want to be able to distribute APY for as long as possible. Obviously, the APY was created as a system to the primary utility of B2M while we were developing all the other utilities. And now, today, there are enough utilities in terms of locking and holding B2M that we can significantly reduce the direct impact of those utilities. We believe that just holding B2M already gives you enough discounts, cashback, promotions, and so on, which more than make up for the possibility that there could be. That being said, and I think we have Jose doing something with the bottle or something. Jose, they
Put some ice in for you, right?
yes, also some ice in the drink. No, sorry about that. An interesting point is this: the longer it lasts, the better. So the idea is to reduce that injection a bit in order to distribute it over a longer period of time. Second, the main and biggest goal would be to try to ensure that the B2M acquired from the market through authorities is greater than what is injected. That would be a really cool goal, and the aim is to increase it by 25%, which would be very powerful for the health of B2M. And also that the injection of new B2M into the supply remains below 5% as it is right now. And finally, regarding the distribution of the pools, not just in terms of the total pool, which as we mentioned is 250 million this past year, not just the total, but also how the different pools are distributed. We are going to review this as well, because what we want is for those users who are at higher levels and who lock up their tokens for longer periods to receive a higher APY. And we want to emphasize this much more. While it is already emphasized, obviously, as shown by the 50 million, 100, and 100, but we want to make it even more pronounced because we feel that those B2M holders who commit for longer periods and reach higher levels are the ones we should reward the most. So we still haven't decided on the exact values, but these are the guidelines and the strategic direction we're following to define those values. And finally, now for real, I promise I won't say anything else. We'll move on to some questions now, but it's just that I haven't been here in a long time and I have to make the most of the opportunity.
No problem, Anil. Everything is really interesting.
So the last thing we're trying to do, or that we're going to try to implement in the coming months, and as I said, we haven't titled this as "We Listen to You," because everything I'm talking about now is going to come from, well, it's not that it comes directly from there, but it's true that once we review all the feedback ideas, we see that some of them are very much in line with what we want to do. And some of them we take directly from the feedback channel if we see that there are a lot of votes, which is more detailed information about B2M. Here you can calmly review in the replay what the initiatives are. Basically, they are about being able to see B2M information more clearly, such as, for example, being able to see in euros how much I have in each of the lockup pools, which is something some of you have mentioned to us several times, or seeing the lockup duration in the different pools. This is also something we can work on. And finally, we are also trying to work on launching new pro pairs against B2EM, at least against the major coins. None of this is 100% clear yet in terms of when it will be developed or with what values or other details, but it is true that it is being planned and analyzed. So now that's really it. I'll just finish by reminding you about the campaign, because since I started with that almost an hour ago, maybe some people have already forgotten. Let's remember that we are in an active campaign. I've seen some comments on YouTube and elsewhere. We're going to try to send messages calculating the level of participation each user has. That's something we're having some trouble executing, but we're going to try to do it. We have 2 months. Let's see if in these 2 months we can do it, so you can see a bit of your participation count and decide whether to participate more or less. What I recommend is it never hurts to have more entries. In the end, the more entries you have, the higher your chances. And above all, remember that you can participate in all 4 segments. Only one is limited to those users who have been holding 10,000 B2M or more for over 6 months. For the other segments, anyone can participate as many times as they want. So I encourage you to participate and see if you become one of the winners, which I hope you do. And that's it from me.
Well, hey, fantastic, Neil. Honestly, you've mentioned a lot of things. For those of you who joined a little later, don't worry because it's recorded. You can rewind the video and watch any part that especially interested you or that you want to explore further. We encourage you to leave all your questions. Neil, we've left a few questions in the Discord group in case you want us to review them. And if you agree while you review them, let's say hello to Giovanni, who's been left in the darkest night. But anyway, let's make sure we can see him and give him a warm welcome. How are you, Giovanni? How are you doing? You're muted, I think.
No, it's fine now.
Let's see if...
Honestly, thank you so much, Neil, for answering all those questions and concerns that you've managed to address in the Telegram group and in some of the videos that have been made. Honestly, there are very few left. One of them, for example, if you could take the opportunity, Hugo Martinez asked if there's any thought of having a space center level higher than 7 in the future. There's some concern, in quotes, about that. Should there be a level 8? And maybe you can tell us why it's not necessary.
This is a question I've seen a lot in the Telegram group, and I feel, well, actually, it's not just a feeling, it's a fact, okay? And I'm not a psychologist, but I do know that there are theories and studies about this. In the end, we tend to think that our environment is a representation of reality or of the whole reality. That happens to me, for example, with the crypto topic. In the end, you know, I work at Bit2Me, but also on a personal level, I'm really passionate about the crypto sector. And I feel like everyone knows about crypto. But then, until I actually go outside and talk to people and they ask me what Bitcoin is, I realize, oh, wow, hold on, there's still a long way to go. This is kind of what's happening with what I'm seeing from people on Telegram. I see there are people who are at level 7, but from Bit2Me, I can tell you that's a minority. I understand that on Telegram, it might seem like there are a lot of you, but that's because by chance, or rather it's not really by chance, you're the most active ones, the most involved, the ones who share the most, the ones who help the most. So it makes sense that you're also the ones who trust B2M the most and therefore are at higher levels. What do I mean by that? That we're not ruling out the idea of launching new levels, but the priority is for those users who are not yet B2EM holders to become B2M holders, so they can perceive that value and acquire it. And for those B2M holders who have a small amount of B2M, to increase their exposure so they can take advantage of better benefits. That's the priority, not out of lack of interest or care, far from it, but purely based on quantitative numbers in terms of impact and benefit. The impact of converting those people is much greater for the health of the token than creating a higher level, which, as you already know, could mean a lot of points to analyze, such as what kind of advantages to offer, running all the calculations that need to be done. As you know, there are many within the levels to provide these benefits and so on. So it's not ruled out, but it's not the short-term priority.
Very well. Alberto Rodriguez asked an interesting question regarding whether the topic of having our own dedicated network, as well as a token that is moving or operating on such a network, is something we should consider. Thank you for bringing this up. Is B2Me still working on it, or have we put it on hold?
That's a very good question. In this case, as many of you know, we have the 2-chain. It's true that the 2-chain is B2Me's blockchain network, which I think has gone quite unnoticed, which is normal because we've been in testing. Until very recently, we had very few transactions because there was only one company making those transactions. Here, the sharpest and smartest people are the ones investigating. Those who are a bit more alert are already noticing that there's more activity, because it's true that we're bringing in new companies that are using the network, and the gas token being used is B2M. And that's correct. It's the same B2M that you all know. But for now, we haven't made a big push or a major commitment because from a strategic standpoint, the company believes there are other priorities before doing that. But yes, it is still up and running and it continues to be used now more than before, in fact, but we aren't doing any kind of promotion for this reason because we still believe it's not the right time to go all in and take that big step. But yes, it's active, it's being used, and of course, there are expectations for growth.
Well, another question. I'm not sure. Maybe you already explained it, but perhaps there's still some doubt. It says Neil mentioned that most of the lockups are for 12 months, which shows people's confidence in the project. Has there been any thought about adding new lockup periods, for example, 2 or 3 years?
Wow. Honestly, we haven't thought about that, but it's the kind of feature that's totally reactive. That is, it's something the user asks for and needs. So seeing that there are so many people, as we mentioned, choosing the 12-month period, we can consider it, and we are going to seriously consider expanding to longer timeframes because we see that there is that interest and demand. And something I haven't mentioned to you, but I think it's a very interesting detail, is that when the redemption missions were launched, they had a limit, if I'm not mistaken, of 1,000 euros in B2M. Why? I'm going to be very honest. Because I didn't expect that at the beginning we would reach that limit and that a user would redeem 1,000 euros in B2M at the beginning. And it's already happened more than once that a user has come and said, hey, give me more. I've already finished these missions. So it always feels really good when it's the community itself that demands and needs to go beyond what was originally planned. So also regarding redemption, just so you know, as a small detail, we will launch new milestones so that you can redeem much more and therefore earn more points.
Fantastic.
On the other hand, Neil, going hand in hand with level 7, higher and so forth, we also have to remember that thank you. In order to not only reach level 7, unless we block or redeem, We have to do exactly the same as you've done in all the suites, whether it's buying, selling, or exchanging. That is, the points expire unless we take advantage of blocking or redemption. And just as important, all the cashback we receive from B2M, which comes from market purchases, now we have the new feature in ER, which is the savings mode. This means that now, automatically, all that cashback we receive, both the direct cashback for paying at online or physical stores and the extra cashback from discounts, as we say, from live, will go directly into the flexible pool. So it's actually quite interesting and much more convenient, which is something people were also asking for.
100%.
Well, for now, we actually don't see any more direct questions about the token at this time. Because, well, there are quite a few other topics, but we can talk about the t-shirt.
The B2M Holder Edition t-shirt, what's going on with that? Will there be a second edition? For those of us who already have it, can we redeem it or something?
To be very transparent with you, we're still recovering from the first edition on an operational level in terms of management and everything else. So for now, no. Also, going back to the whole reflection about supply and demand, if we release a lot more t-shirts, they lose their value. So for the B2M Holder Edition, only a few t-shirts were released. I don't even remember the exact number, but I know it wasn't many. And if I'm not mistaken, Giovanni, you have a few set aside for when there are in-person events, so you can hand some out. Thank you. So if there are people who are interested, you already know. Turn on Telegram, enable notifications, and when there's an event, let's go.
They always end up passing the ball to me. Honestly, it's funny, but I appreciate it because people were just asking about how to get a Bit2Me mug and so on. And when we go to in-person events that we participate in, we actually give out t-shirts, mugs, and we interact with everyone there. And it's super important to keep taking advantage of that. The Bit2Me feedback tool, as you just mentioned, Neil, is something that's used a lot. We've also started holding talks again with members of the community, both new and veteran users, to share the strategies they use. For example, recurring purchases, stable coins. Basically, each user is explaining all of that to the rest. In other words, it's not Bit2Me saying it, but another user who is sharing and explaining how they use it. So take advantage of it, the talk. We'll try to give a bit more notice next time because the last one was announced practically just an hour before. But, well, it was just to get back to the 10%.
And that's it for now. Jose has left us a question in the chat, so I'm going to read it out loud for everyone. Neil says, why can't the B2M tokens, which have already been collected from users who canceled their 12-month lock, meaning those who initially locked their tokens for 12 months and then later decided to cancel, also be burned each month from what is collected? Why does it have to be in the medium and long term instead of being done on a monthly basis as well? This is a really interesting question, and it's important to understand the reasoning behind the current approach.
Yes, that's a very good question. A small clarification. It's not just about the 12-month locks, it's about the 3, 6, and 12-month locks. Any early unlock generates that 10% special condition fee for early unlocking. So it's a small clarification, but it's a very good question. Why don't we just combine them right away with the ones users redeem, and from there do the direct burn? Basically this, as I mentioned, I think it was a couple of live sessions ago when we launched the feature. And to be very transparent with you, again, there's a really good side and a really bad side to being in the sector we're in and to building the whole industry as we go along. You know that Bit2Me has always positioned itself as a regulated entity with a great deal of security for its users. And that's something that right now, it's a huge draw for users because they see so many problems on other platforms and come to us seeking that security, that trust, that support. Something that represents us like this can also be seen in the B2M token. With the B2M token, we've been working for a long time to find new functionalities, new mechanics. We're in constant contact with regulators and others to see which directions we can take, which we can't, and working together to help build this ecosystem and the crypto industry in Spain. In this particular case, we still can't carry out direct actions because of, well, bureaucracy, let's say, or tying up a few loose ends that, as I mentioned, I can already tell you will end up happening, but they can't be executed in the short term. So as many of you are already doing, consider this as already out of circulation because technically it is already out of circulation. And when possible, these schemes in question will be carried out. And that's it.
Perfect, understood. Well then, Anil, it's been a pleasure. Stick around if you want, just in case any questions come up. Giovanni and I are going to explain a bit about this month's updates. We won't spend too much time on it, but we'll go through it fairly quickly to complete the program. And if you want to stay, if any questions come up, we can address them since you're here.
All right, I think I'll stick around, but if anything comes up, I'll let you know.
All right, all right. Also, if you're going to leave, let us know, so at least you can say goodbye to everyone.
Sounds good.
So, Jose, what I'm going to do now is share my screen with you for just a moment, because the very first thing that we need to look at together is how we can go about making those recurring purchases. Let's take our time to carefully review each step so that everything is clear before we move forward. So it's very simple. Within the platform or on your mobile phone, you just go to the buy button. If we don't want to be logging in constantly, although it does pay off to check in every day, but if we want to set up a scheduled purchase regardless of what happens in the market and to take advantage of these kinds of drops happening now, we can go here to purchase options, recurring purchase. And here in recurring purchase, we choose the currency. If we want B2M, if we want Bitcoin. I'm going to select Bitcoin, but you can choose B2M, especially today with Neil's special. And here, what's the advantage of this? Well, the main advantage is that by making an automatic purchase, regardless of how volatile the market is, what we're doing is averaging out our entry price. So, for example, if we make purchases during a dip in the market, we're not putting all of our available capital in at a single price, which could then drop even further and make us regret not waiting and buying a bit later. So what we enable is a daily, weekly, or monthly purchase, or whatever you prefer. And we simply say, okay, weekly, I want to buy 30 euros of B2M every week. You'll see the current price of B2M right here on your screen, and that purchase will be automatically handled for you, which you can easily link directly to your card. I think this is a feature that not everyone knows about, so we're sharing it here so you can see it directly. And if you have any questions or doubts, you can let us know. Of course, you can change the currency. You can choose whichever one you want, as I mentioned earlier. This is just here as a helpful reminder in case someone wasn't already aware of this particular feature or functionality. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, Jose, just for a brief moment, so please bear with me. 3, 2, 1, I'm on.
In fact, regarding recurring purchases, I've mentioned it before in some of the live streams that I have 2 set up daily. One of them is €1 in Bitcoin and €1 in B2M. And then I have other monthly ones, which I can't really specify. But that's the idea. You can organize it according to your interests, by currency, by period, whether daily, weekly, and honestly, it's great. Most people who use it find it super convenient.
What else? Well, actually, we now have a simulator for those of you who want to see the potential of leaving your cryptocurrencies inside Bit2Me. To generate that bonus, that reward that Neil was also talking about with B2M, you can make a projection and see how much of that token of that cryptocurrency will be delivered to you. And therefore, you can make a calculation using the percentage, which is dynamic and adjusts according to each moment to see how much you will have in 1 month, 6 months, or a year, etc. I think that's also interesting. Also, just a reminder that we have B2Me Live, which is the offers and discount service that you can view directly on the website, and which appears, for example, on the card with those agreements we make with different businesses, with different stores, and we have special prices where you pay and also receive an additional bonus on top of the cashback you are already generating with the MasterCard that is linked to the wallet of your user account. Just to remind you, obviously, as Neil has already mentioned as well, we have the Bit2Me card, which you can connect with the stable coins. There are stable coins that are offering returns of 7 to 8%, like SURS. We will continue listing different stable coins, and depending on the stable coin, we can slightly adjust the utility percentage, the percentage we provide with the DB2M token. As Neil mentioned, you can activate it and receive it daily, which means you are earning compound interest that accumulates over time. With Bit2Me Pay, if you want to pay other users on the platform, you simply select Pay, enter their user account or email address, and they will receive the payment as a notification. It is a completely free service. You can also use Loan, which is a lending service. So if the price of Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, Ethereum, XRP, drops, you can still take advantage of it, because if you collateralize, a price drop gives you more margin for decline when using that collateral to request liquidity. Obviously, this carries its own risks. In fact, as you know, 2 weeks ago on Friday, there was a massive liquidation, and in the case of XRP, it actually went over 50%. So Be careful because it's a service that has a lot of great features, but you also need to be aware of the risks, right? And then, well,
two things, Javier. First, people are asking where they can find the air simulator. Specifically, in the section in the Bit2Me Air tab at the top, you'll see the simulator there. It's important, as always, to make sure you have the latest version, the app updated. Why? Because you can see new features, performance improvements, and security enhancements. Also, not less important regarding the discounts is that, thank you, Bit2Me Travel, which offers accommodations all over the world with an extra discount. If I'm not mistaken, it's 4%, but you can check it yourself. And even if you pay with the card, you can get up to a 7% discount plus the 4%. So make sure to take advantage of those discounts that are available. Casva comes from Bayat Markets, which is a support for the B2M ecosystem.
we have more than 400 cryptocurrencies we've announced. Well, those special promotions we've done are precisely because of the announcement of listing 400 cryptos. In the wallet, we've listed Aster, FF, and SAN along with their communities. If you want to check the price, as always, there's a little dot on the new coins you have within Bit2Me. You can already see them listed and categorized within the app or the web wallet. We have a new stablecoin, EUROD. It's available in the wallet and in car. You can connect it and make payments. We also have ones denominated in dollars for those who want to take advantage of the spread between the euro and the dollar. Right now, the dollar is gaining relevance. We reached 1.19. Now we're at about 1.15. So that also benefits you directly. And all of this, of course, combined with the services we've mentioned, Earn, Bit2Me Pro. We also have the trading platform. New listings that we encourage you to discover and check out. And to wrap up, since we've been going for quite a while now, and it's honestly been quite an intense experience, let me take a moment to tell you about the events that we've personally attended in person this month. We were in Madrid. We attended the Rankia Awards ceremony. Jose Luis and Giovanni were there. We were also at Merch, this event at the Palacio de Cibeles at the beginning of the month, where a lot of people from the institutional and traditional sectors came. And there were many conversations about what we do at Bit2Me, not just nationally, but internationally as well. We were also at the VDS in Valencia, which is a notable event held inside the Palace of Arts and Sciences, and a lot of us assembled together there. We had several debates, several panels. David Ortega was there, Abel was there, I was there as well talking about Bitcoin treasuries, and we've also been, well, at Slush in Helsinki 2025 with ISEX, and we just keep going, well, everywhere, right? Trying to spread the word, trying to make everything known about this technology that is literally changing the world right now. So, as always, it's a pleasure to be with you, to have you with us, to have you here. We want to thank everyone who is watching live, who leaves their questions, their support, as Neil mentioned in the Telegram group, where Giovanni is always there trying to lend a hand. So, to all the passengers, we thank you. And all that feedback, Giovanni, remember that it's always extremely useful to us, and we appreciate any comment, any observation, any idea that you want us to implement at Bit2Me. You know, we've already been around for 10 years. We've celebrated our anniversary, and we're going for 10 more. So we have tons of ideas and a huge desire to keep contributing, to keep building, to reach new markets, to welcome new clients from other countries. And that's what we're working on. That's what we're working on. And we really appreciate all your support. I don't know if Giovanni, Neil, we can wrap up, maybe say a few words.
Yeah, well, for my part, I think we've already covered enough, so I won't go on much longer. Again, I just want to thank all the B2M holders so much, both the longtime ones who help and support the newcomers and the new ones. Welcome. We hope to be able to launch many more initiatives, much more. More potential, much more growth, and much more adoption of B2M. That's what we're here for. And that's it. Thank you for everything.
Thank you all so much once again to all those incredibly active users, to the passes, to all the community ambassadors. You truly are the voices of the users. When we have discussions, even when the team is present, you convey all those questions and concerns to the heads of each department of each product, like Carter and others. So this is the best way.
You're cutting out as well, and I think we have connection issues. We have connection issues with Giovanni. Anyway, as I was saying, we really appreciate you all so much. We're heading towards the 5th anniversary of B2M Neil for next year. We hope to have you here before then with us. And once again, sending a big hug to everyone watching live. A hug from Giovanni as well, who I'm sure wanted to send one your way too. And well, we have to ask for a like, right? Since we're here, Neil, let's ask them to like and subscribe to the channel. We've got more content now.
Like a big video again.
That's it. That's it. We have new shows coming soon. Daniel's is the first, but it won't be the last. We'll have other colleagues too. By creating material on the ground, we want to make content with interviews with people to gradually raise awareness and understanding in society. I think that's important. And that's it, Giovanni. You're closing today. Come on, go ahead.
No, that's all. Thank you, and see you in one of the talks or in the next live stream. So thank you all.
Big hug. Hugs to all. Jose, the control there, everything fantastic. And a huge thank you to everyone who was in the video and to those who watch it later. Hugs to all.
Hug. Bye.